Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make these Wirework rose rings, and here I have two different versions just to show you the different look you can get. I have one that's a bit smaller and then a larger one there. So obviously they're going to look just slightly different depending on what you prefer. But it's the exact same technique. The bigger one you just continue for a bit by making it bigger using the same technique. So if you want to learn how to make this Wirework rose ring with a little bead in the middle there as well for a nice accent, then keep watching. So it's these materials here that we'll need. Now I've got two different gauges of wire. They're both regular round copper wire, and I'm using a 0.6mm. This is actually going to be a base wire, so it's quite a fine base wire, but we're going to be wrapping it with a 0.25mm, so they're going to work nicely together and it's going to give a much finer and delicate look. And that's what we want as well. So we don't want it to be too bulky in this case. And then here I have just a 4mm round, and I'm just using a purple coated hematite gemstone bead. You can always use whatever you want to. Also colour choice, it's completely up to you. But this is just what I'm using. We just need one of those. So let's get it together and let's get started. So the wires that we'll need is 4 lengths of a 0.6mm wire here of about 50 centimeters each. And these are the ones that are going to be the base wires. So this is going to be enough to make the ring band itself and then also the rose on top of it. And then as for the weaving wire, what I'm going to actually do is work with it from the reel here, because we're going to have to work with pretty long lengths because it's such a fine wire. So weaving just a short length takes up quite a bit of it. So I just find it easier to work with it off the reel because it's really hard to know exactly how much you're going to need, and I'd rather not risk running out. So then what we need to do first is start making the ring band. So I have all my base wires ready, so the ones I cut off with a 0.6mm, all 4 of them. I'm going to start with one at a time, and then we need to start weaving with our weaving wire here as well. Now what I like to do is, like I said, I'm working with this off the reel just because it's hard to know what length you're going to need, and it makes it a bit easier as well because it uses a lot. So what I'm going to do though is I'm not working all the way from the end of the wire here, the weaving wire, because the way I've made this ring is we're going to need this tail later on when we're going to start making the legs for the rose as well. So that's why I'm actually going to go from the end of the wire and about 1 meter in, and this is what I'm going to start weaving now for the ring band. Now if you're not comfortable with that, having that long tail, kind of, it might get in the way in that, just try and keep it out of the way though, gently. But if you're not comfortable with that, you can always start from the end, and all you're going to have to do is, when I would use this, you just have to add in a new wire. It's not a big deal, you can do that. I just prefer to try and do it this way. So I have my long tail here on this side. Then I'm going to start with my very first base wire. And what we want to do is the ring band needs to go across the middle of a base wire. So we have roughly even lengths on both sides there. So I'm not going to start weaving right in the middle. I'm going to start a little bit to the side and then weave across the middle here for the ring band. So I've got my weaving wire behind my base wire, a bit to the side from the middle, and then what we need to do is we're going to be using the diagonal wire weave here. So first of all, I just want to attach my weaving wire. So that means I'm going to go around the base wire once, like that, so it's now attached, and then I'm going to go straight into my weave. So I'm going to grab my very next base wire, place that above the previous, the very first one there, place it above it and on top of the base of the weaving wire, sorry. So there we go. And then I'm going to wrap around both of them together, just a single wrap over the top here, like that, and down behind the two. Now what we need to do is come up between the two wires that we just wrapped. So I take my weaving wire up between there and then push it all the way down. And then I need to add in my next base wire. So grab that, and the same again, place it above the previous one, so you're stacking them on top of each other the whole time, and on top of the weaving wire as well. And now I'm going to go across the top 2 base wires that are now the new top 2 ones, across the top of them and back down behind. And then again we need to come up between the 2 wires that we just wrapped together. So that means I go up in between the 2 that I just went over at the front, like that. And the last base wire, add that in as well, same principle, put it above the previous base wires and on top of your weaving wire. And then we have the weaving wire coming up. Now we need to wrap it above and across the top of the two new top wires there, base wires. So just all the time go across the top of the two top ones, down behind the back, and then up between the two that you just wrapped. And because now we don't have any more base wires left to add in, this is all the ones we're going to use. So we're coming up between the two last ones there, and now we just need to do a single wrap around just the top wire on its own. So the very last one that we added in, just do one wrap around that, and then again down behind the back of all of them here. Now you just want to make sure that all your wraps here, your weave is nice and tight, so you can just squeeze them together if you need to. But using this finer wire, the 0.25, makes it much easier to get a neat weave as well, because it's so easy to work with. But just make sure you kind of keep squeezing your wraps together. So this is basically the wrap, the weave. I'm going to start again. So I'm coming all the way behind all of them, down to the bottom, so the very first base wire that we added in to begin with. I'm going to go around just the bottom one on its own. So just this one here. Push that down. Every time you make a wrap, make sure to always push it down against the previous ones. Now we need to go over the top of the two base wires here. So in this case it's the bottom two base wires. So it's the bottom one again that we just wrapped, but then the next one as well. Over the top of them, push it down, down behind the back of them, and remember then up in between the two that we just wrapped to get ready to wrap around the next two. So basically we're stepping up one every time. So now the one that was the top one, the first two that we wrapped together, is now the bottom one, and the next one is the top one. So we want to wrap the next two base wires together over the top of them, push it down, down behind the back, and come up in between the two that we just wrapped, and then push that down. And doing this as well, holding your wire when you bringing it up between the two wires that you just wrapped, pushing that down here also really helps tighten up the weave. Bring it across the top of the top two base wires now, because we now reach the top one, like that, down behind the back, up between the two that you just wrapped. Again, press that down, push it all the way down there, so you get a nice and tight weave. And the last one is just around the top one, single wire on its own, just like that. And again, down behind the back of all of your base wires now, to basically start over again. Squeeze it together, and this is basically the weave. So you want to keep doing this. Go from the bottom, start wrapping the first wire on its own. Do this for a while until you have a decent length, and obviously you want to then measure it against, say, a ring mandrel or the size that you need your ring to be. So we don't want to make too much of a weave, but also if it's rather be too short, because you can always add more weave. If you make it too long, you can take it off, take the weave apart, but it does weaken the wire, so you want to try and avoid doing that. So this is the weave. I also have a more detailed tutorial on this specific weave if you want to look at that. I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below. Otherwise you want to keep weaving this for a while, like I said, until you have enough to make your ring band. So I now kept making my weave here until I have a decent length to reach the size that I want my ring to be. And what I have is about 6 centimeters of weave. Now obviously that's going to make the size that I want. It's going to be about a size N, so an average size. So it's just for reference. You can either make it bigger or smaller, obviously depending on what you need. But then what we need to do is take this weave that we've done and shape it into the ring band. What you'll notice as well is the weaving wire. This is the long tail that I left right at the beginning here. That's pointing out in one direction. And then on the other end, the tail that I've been working with is pointing in the opposite direction. You just want to make sure that your weaving wire is doing that, because when we're going to wrap this around the ring mandrel, we want to do it in the right way, so these are going to be facing each other properly. So I'm going to flip it around, and also the weaving here is roughly in the middle of all my base wires, like I said. Now one thing I just want to mention, if you find when you've done your weave that it's a bit too far off to one side, then what you can do is move your weave gently along the base wires. So just take one end, start and just move it a little bit at a time. Just make sure you do it gently and just move it a bit at a time, and you'll be able to move your weave a little bit along your base wires depending where you want it to be. So try and make sure it's as much in the middle as you can. It's just to make sure that you have even lengths as much as possible on either side here, because obviously we're going to be using them to make the same thing, so we don't want to run out on one side before we run out on the other side and we're not done with the piece yet. So I then got my weave here, and then I need to take my ring mandrel. Now I'm just using this because I've got sizes as well. You can also use a marker pen or something that's going to be the right size and shape to fit your finger. And then I'm going to put my weave behind the ring mandrel, and like I said, I want about a size N, so I'm going to take the ends of my base wires and start wrapping them around the ring mandrel. And now this is where we need to cross over the wires in the right way. So what we want to do is the groups of base wires, so the 4 wires coming from one side and the 4 wires coming from the other side of the weave, all we're doing is crossing them next to each other. We're not intertwining them or anything, we're just doing it next to each other. And what you want to do as well is cross them to the side, so your weaving wire on both sides are coming in towards each other and towards the middle. So as you can see here, this one is going in that direction there, so that's the one we want to make sure to go on the side, so the weaving wire goes towards the other base wires there, because that's, we need to use this as well to then kind of fasten it in place but also attach the bead that we're going to use. So just keep shaping it around the ring mandrel, pull it tight. Now what I like to do as well, once you've got the shape in place here, because when you pull and shape your weave around the ring mandrel, when you then release it, your wire will always spring back a bit and actually become larger than the size that you tightened it on. So what I always like to do is go down some sizes and tighten it down there. We're still going to get the nice shape, and then just push it down to the size that I want it to be, because then it hugs just nicely and it's much easier to keep the right size. So there we go. I'm just going to sort out my weaving wire. This is the one from the bottom section here is now going across the top, and the other one is coming from that top section, and they're both going in towards each other, and that's exactly what we want. So now that I have this in place and I've got the right size, then it's time to start making the top part. And then, because we've done the main weaving now, so all the ring band is done, then what I want to do, because obviously we have this long tail that we left at the beginning, if you did that, where I left about 1 meter or so. Now I just want to cut the wire that I've been working with, the weaving wire from that's still attached to the reel. I want to cut that off as well, because there's no reason to really have it on anymore. But what I'm just going to do is just cut it off the same length as the weaving wire that I left at the beginning. So the tail we have, you just easy measurement there. You might as well just use that to measure against. Also, so you get the same size roughly. There's no point in making it longer or anything really, because ideally all the weaving we're going to be doing now in the different sections are going to be about the same lengths, because we're going to be using them pretty evenly throughout. So I've cut that off now, so we now have 2 tails here coming from each side, one from each side there on the ring band. So now what we need to do is add in the bead. What I also would recommend that you do now is, we need some more weaving wire. You might as well just cut them off now, and again just cut the same length that you have as a tail here. So just use your tail to measure against. We need another 2 lengths of our weaving wire, just of the same length as these. So then now, before we continue with our weaving, we need to just add our bead here in the center, because right here where the 2 ends of the weave meets, that's going to be the very center of the piece, of the top of the ring there. And the way that we're going to do that is by using the 2 ends of the weaving wire. So as you can see here, like I said, they're going right towards each other, so that is perfect for adding in the bead. So I'll take 1 length of wire first. I'll get out the bead that I want to use, my hematite gemstone here. Just add that onto one of them, bring it down, and then I'm going to get the other length coming from the other side and also go through the same bead, but we want to make sure we go through in the opposite direction. So it's coming from there, and then you just want to take the end of the opposite wire, go through the same bead in the opposite direction, pull that through as well. And obviously I would recommend Just doing this gently, because it is wire working. We try and make sure it doesn't kink or bend unnecessarily. And then, I'm getting closer here, just pull it down towards the middle, and when you pull it all the way, your bead is going to sit right there in between the two sides of the ring. So basically right where the weave itself ends, the two ends there, that's where it's going to sit. It's going to fit in there just perfectly and make a nice spacing in the middle. So we now have the bead in place. Then what we need to do now is pick back up our weave again. We need to start weaving quite a bit more before we can then start making the actual rose. And what we're going to do is use these tails of our base wires still to keep weaving. Instead of weaving now around 4 of the base wires at a time, like we did on the ring band, we're only going to be using 2 at a time now. It's going to be the exact same weave, but we're just only using 2 of the base wires at a time instead of 4. So just straighten out your wires, the base wires here, to make sure that when you weave around them, you get a nice and even weave. So what I'm going to do, both my weaving wires are coming across the top of them. I'm just going to start on one side. It doesn't matter what side you start on. We're going to go over and do the same thing on the other one. I'm going to bring it underneath the base wires before we start weaving, and like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm coming up between, in the middle of all 4 base wires here. So I've kind of separated them out into 2 pairs. I've got 2 base wires on the bottom that I'm not going to weave around just now, and then I've got the 2 top ones that are furthest in towards the bead, and I'm coming up between the 2 pairs. And then, like I said, we're picking back up the exact same weave, but just with less base wires. So I take my weaving wire around just the bottom base wire here out of the 2 that we're using, which just means I go in between, down between the 2 to wrap around the bottom one on its own first. And here you just want to make sure you tighten it nicely, not too tight because the bead needs to sit in place, but this also makes sure that we're getting the right gap and the bead is going to stay in place and not get too big a gap. And then over the top of both of them, push that down, and then we need to come up between the 2. Remember, always when you wrap around 2 over the top, always come up between from the bottom, and then just around the top one on its own. So it's the exact same weave as the ring band, just with less base wires there, like I said. So there we go, that's started out now, and it's fastened the bead more in place. Now before I continue too much, I like to just go to the other side and do the same thing. It just secures the whole thing and the bead in place, I find, before we keep working with it. So separate out your base wires. Take the weaving wire below the top 2 base wires that we're going to be weaving around, and then just separate them out so you can start weaving. And same weave again around the bottom one on its own. Just pull it nice and tight. So now I can feel that the bead is going to sit in there nice and securely. Then around the top of both of the base wires and come up between the 2. And then just around the top one on its own, and make sure you push it down. You get a nice and tight weave. And now the bead's in place there. So basically what we want to do now is continue. I've fastened it nicely in place, so you can just continue weaving on this side if you want to. It doesn't really matter because we'll be going back to the other side anyway. You want to continue weaving on these 2 that you started out now with the weaving wire that was kind of still attached, the weaving wire that we used for the whole ring band. So this is going to be for the 2 inner sections, 1 on each side. And we're just going to continue doing this until we have quite a decent length on each side. So that was another go around of the weave. Push it nice and tight. So you just continue doing this on this one here and also on the other one that I already started. So like I said, the 2 inner ones. Now once you then get a decent length there, I like to try and make sure that they end up being about the same length. Once you've done that, then what we want to do is attach a new weaving wire to the other sections here. So that's the ones that I said that we need to cut off about the same length as the ones that are attached here. And all you do is take the end of your wire, just a short length here, the end, the tail to hold on to. Just bring it underneath the ring band so you can comfortably hold on to it. And then you basically just want to pick up the same weave on these two bottom base wires there. So that just means that we can put the other ones out of the way. Again, it's the exact same weave. Go around the bottom one on its own. Push it down around both of them. And push it down. And then around that top one out of these two on its own. And there we go. And that is then the new weaving wire attached by going directly into the weave, the exact same weave that we're using on the other ones as well. And it's also going to be really nice and seamless doing this. You won't really be able to tell that you've added in a new wire. And obviously we'll cut off the tails at the end. But that's what you want to do. Obviously attach the new wire on the other side as well. You can just do it once you've done a longer length than the inner one, so it makes it a little bit easier to keep track of. But then you want to do this for a decent length. I would say maybe start out with about 5 centimeters of weave on each section. And obviously how long a length you need of the weave on these sections, it really depends on how large you want the rows on the top to be. But I would say start with about that, and then you can always add in more weave once you build up the rows and see if you want it bigger or if you like it a certain size. So just do this weave for now, and then I'll show you the next step. So now that I kept doing my weave here on all the legs, so I have all 4 done about the same length here, then what I'm just going to do is want to go back to where I started out on the legs, because these little tails will be added in the new wire to be able to make all the legs there. I want to just get rid of that now, because it's just easier while we're at this, we have the open space before we actually start making the rows on the top. So towards the back there, I'm going to take my cutters and then cut it down so I have about a tiny little end left right on the back there, which now when you run your fingers over that, you can feel that sticking out. So what I'm going to do is take my chain nose and then squeeze that in, and what I like to do is squeeze it down, and then with my pliers just roll it a little bit in the direction that the wire is going around the base wire, and that really tucks it in and gets it out of the way. And then make sure you put your finger over it to make sure you can't feel it or anything. If you can feel it, squeeze it in a bit more, and then if you maybe need to cut it down a bit more, then that's completely up to you. But if you can't feel it, then it should be fine. And you can go over and do the same thing on the other side. Like this, just get it out, cut it down so there's a short length. Finishing at the back here. And then just make sure you tuck that down. So there we go. So now we got rid of those tails. Then what we need to do is go back to the top here and start using these legs that we've now weaved to make the rows. And that part is really quite simple. So what I'm just going to do is make sure that I kind of have all my wires at the ends of my legs here separated out, just so they don't get tangled with each other. And then if you're familiar with how to make wire roses in a simple way, so a simple wirework rose ring, you'll see that this is a very similar, in fact the same technique. All we're doing is we're using weaved lengths of wire instead of just a bare length of wire. So what I'm going to do is start on one side. I'm going to lift the inner one up just a little bit. Then the outer one here, I want to bring that underneath the inner leg to come in towards close to the bead. And because this is weaved wire, the 2 base wires are lying next to each other, so it's kind of flat. Now it's up to you really how you want this to be. If you want to try and keep them flat as you're moving them, you have to make sure to kind of hold them down and flatten them so they don't, say, go up on their side like that, and bring it all the way in, something like this, right close to the bead. And then I like to just lift this up a little bit as well. So from the side you can see it's actually lifted up a bit and not just flush with the top of the ring. I'm going to take the other one that's now the outer one, that was the inner one first. Now I'm going to bring that underneath the one that's now the inner one. Bring that around You can hold your fingers on it if you want to, it's going to help keep its shape and keep it flat. Bring it all the way around like this. So now we're basically reaching towards the other side of the bead. Now I'm just going to leave it here for now because you can see we're getting close to the other side here where we have the other legs. So before we overlap them, I want to also incorporate these into it. And I'm basically just going to do the exact same thing. Lift the inner one up a little bit, take the outer one underneath that and bring it in towards, underneath and in towards the bead there, right next to it. Lift it up a bit when you're happy with the placement. Then take the one that's now the outer one underneath the new inner one here, and then again in towards the bead there underneath, and again I'm lifting that up a bit. So now that's pretty much reached the other side of the bead, and you can see this is going to be the very center of the rose. And then you can just manipulate a bit, you can push them a bit closer if you want to, if you don't think they're quite close enough to the bead. But then basically all we do is continue to do this and swap over from side to side. So the wires are going to kind of be chasing each other, going all the way around. And we have to just do a bit at a time on each side. So I'm going back to the first one I did, bring that a bit further around, lift it up, and then I take the one that's now the outer one, bring that around underneath the inner one of the two, out underneath it, and lift it up a bit. And like that. Go back to the other side because you can see we're getting close again. Lift the inner one up, and then bring the outer one underneath that. So we're always working with the 2 legs of wire at a time, 2 legs of weaved wire at a time. So you swap them from side to side and gradually building it outward, making basically a spiral from each side going outward, building it up like this. And there we go. This one then we can do a little bit longer, a bit further, because we got further space until we reach over to the other one. I'm going to lift that up. I'm going to be able to do the next one as well. Bring the outer one underneath. Back around like that. You can really see it's starting to build up now. So now I'm going to have to go to the other one again. And then you can see we're gradually using more and more of this section that we weaved on all of these lengths of wire, the base wires. And this is why I said it's really impossible to judge how much you need to weave beforehand. So I just recommend doing about the same length on all of them. And then if you find out they're not long enough as you're doing this, the actual rows, you can just pick the weave back up and weave a bit further, and about equal on all of them as well. So that's how I would recommend to do it. It also depends on how you want your ring to be. Now this one is going to be a little bit smaller of mine. You can also obviously make it larger, but then you'll just have to make sure that you weave quite a bit further than what I've done here. And you might want to then also start with a longer length of your weaving wire on each leg. If you do run out of your weaving wire, it's not a huge deal, because you can just add in as well by finishing off your weaving wire basically the same way that I showed you, in underneath and here, finishing it off like that, squeeze it down, and then take a new weaving wire and start up the exact same weave again, and then build on to your weave that you've already done. So you can easily do that. So it's not a huge deal if you do run out of your weave and you have no more weaving wire left to make more. You can add in some more weaving wire. So you just keep doing like this, and now you can see I've reached the point where I'm kind of reaching the ends of my weaved sections there, but I'm also getting close to where I want to finish. So this is pretty good length for getting a nice smaller size rose, I would say. So this is the smaller size. What I actually want to do is end up just around the side, reach the side of the ring band there, because this is from the top. I have my twist ends here on both sides, and I got my ring band on each side there. So I want this one to come around this side and just finish here by the ring band, and the top one go around and finish by the other side there on that ring band. And that's then basically actually the size that I want for this. So this is going to be a bit of a smaller one, more delicate one, whereas the one I made here, you can see that's much larger. This one, all I did was go an extra time around after where I'm going to stop on this one. So it's completely up to you how large you want it. But like I said, if you do want a larger one, you might have to start off with some longer lengths of weaving wire. So what I'm going to do now, because I can see I'm not going to have quite enough of my weave, I just need to do a little bit more to be able to reach all the way over there. I just need to weave a bit more on all my sections here. Not much because I'm almost there, but just weave enough so that when I twist these all the way around to the side, that it's going to reach right around there, and I'm going to be able to finish off these sections of wire, the weaves that we're doing, underneath in here to get them out of the way and actually finish off and have a final rose on top here. So I'm just going to keep weaving for a bit. So now that I weaved that little bit extra, I'm going to continue making the kind of twist here and then see how I go. So we'll bring the outer one underneath, the exact same thing, and then just lift it up a little bit. And then because I've still got enough room to get over where I want to get here, I'm going to bring the outer one underneath again. And then I think we're pretty much about there. And it looks like I've done just enough weave as well. Because you can see here where I've ended up my twist pretty much, and the weave, it finishes on the side there, so we're gonna use the ring band to help hide the ends then. So I've finished there on that side. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Just continue here a little bit, bring it around, push it up a bit, keep twisting your wires a bit at a time. And the last one, I'm pretty sure, and that should reach just perfectly as well. Actually something around there. So now we've reached the point where this is the size that I want my rose to be. Like I said, if you want to keep going, you can easily do that and make it bigger. You just have to make sure that you weave a fair bit more. So maybe do one more go around to the other side there with both of them. What I do recommend doing is doing the same with both sides from the original place on the either side of the bead in the middle there. So what I recommend is just doing an equal amount with both sides from the original in by the bead. So the sections that we weaved go the same distance around. As you can see, they've kind of been chasing each other, but they've ended up being used equally on each side there. It's just to get as symmetrical a piece as possible and an evenly sized one. So for instance, you don't want one side to be larger than the other one. It's going to look a little bit wrong. So when we reach this point, you can then just take a bit of time, just double check everything, adjust it if you need to. If you want to just readjust the shape a little bit, do that now before we then fasten anything down. Otherwise, if you're happy with it, then all that's really left to do is finish off our wires, so both the actual weaving wire but also obviously the base wires that we use to weave onto. So we need to finish those off, but also make sure they're not going to be in the way, catch or scratch on anything. So what we want to end up doing is getting our wires tucked underneath here, the rose basically, but still on top of the ring band, because I don't want them inside here, the ring band bulking up and basically making the ring smaller, but also they're going to be in the way and catch or scratch while wearing the ring. So we'll end up with something like this. You can also have a look here and see if you push the ends of your wire underneath on the sides there, if you're then happy with how it looks. And otherwise, like I said, you can keep adjusting it. But I'm quite happy with how this looks now. So we are at the point where we need to finish all these off. And to do this is pretty simple. So I'm just going to do it on one side here because it's the same on both sides. I'll just show you on this. What we need to do is obviously finish off the ends of our wire, but also the very end of the twist that we've been going around with, so that spiral. We also just need to fasten that, otherwise you can see it's still loose and the whole piece can kind of move a bit. So we also need to secure it in place. So what I'm going to do is I want to get these wires kind of wedged in between the actual bottom of the rose, but then the ring band as well. And I want to kind of try and finish them off in there. Kind of have this little space and little gap that we can do that in. So start with one pair of your wires here. So what I'm going to do is figure out where I want to finish that off. So I'm going to start with the inner one. And then you can just kind of keep working with it, keep tweaking it until you find the right place. And then also again you can keep adjusting it. Now you might then also find you have to just undo a little bit of your wrap, and if that's the case, and that's fine as well, you just want to undo a bit of your wrap so you have enough bare wire on your base wires. So just find out where you want to finish it off. I think I want to actually tuck this underneath here, right in between the ring band and under the rose. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the little tail I have left of my weaving wire here to then fasten it in place. And the way that I'm going to do that is focus on this section by itself first of all, and I like to just take some chain nose pliers because it's much easier to guide your wire, because obviously this tight space it's really hard to get your fingers in there properly. What I want to then do is just get this other one out of the way for a bit. I want to fasten right by the end of the weave, when my weave finishes, on these space wires for these two, the section that we have here of the two wires. I want to fasten this with my weaving wire down through the rose basically, which is somewhat in here. So wherever your weave finishes, just have a look at your weave, see where the weaving wire is coming from. It's coming from the bottom. So what I want to just do, I want to bring mine in between the two base wires first of all, and then I want to actually get my weaving wire down through the rose, right in the place where they're meeting each other. So I'm going to grab it with my chain nose to guide it through in the right space, something like this, and then it's going to come out on the other side. And as you're pulling this through and guiding, make sure you don't get any kinks in your wire, especially in this 0.25 because it's so fine. You don't want it breaking or anything. Like that, pull it through, and make sure you keep these two wires that we're working with in the place that you want them to finish off. So now this weaving wire is coming out through the rose and it's on the top side. So what I want to do is get it back down through again, but we need to loop around one of the sections here along the way. So I'm going to grab this next one that I can see here, put it through the other side, so just go through a gap so you catch one of these sections like that. And then obviously you might think that you're going to be able to see this, but what you should be able to do is, first of all, it might pull down like to the underneath section where it's the other wires overlapping it, so you can hide it that way. But also what we're going to do is pull it pretty tight. Obviously you don't want to pull too hard because you don't want to break it, but what you're going to probably be able to do is, if you pull it enough, you can sometimes feel or hear a little click, and that's the weaving wire here going in between the weave that you've done in these sections, which means it kind of nestles in there and it just hides that way because it just blends in naturally, so you won't really be able to see it. So I'm coming back up now into place, and then what I want to do is weave back around the section on the back side here. So I'll bring my wire in the right position, and it's back towards, it's coming out basically right at the end of the weave again on this little section that I'm currently fastening. So what I want to do to finish off the fastening, let's get the other one out of the way, is basically just do a little bit of a figure of 8 weave. So I'm going to just come up through the middle, in between the two base wires there, push it right up against where your original weave ends, go through again, come around one wire and back up through again, like that, round again. I'd like to do 2 around the same wire, base wire, and then go through the between the two wires, but around the other wire then. So this is basically the figure of 8 weave. This is purely just to secure it in place. A nice secure wrap. So this piece, the end piece, is fastened to the actual flower, and it also stops the movement much more. As you can see, it's already moving much less. So like this. And you basically just want to do this a few times until you feel like it's nice and secure. So around again here. And push it all the way up, because that way also this won't be too obvious. It'll blend in nicely, but especially if you can manage to tuck it in between the rows there and the ring band. So there we go. It's now fastened pretty well. Like I said, you can do this however much you want to until you feel like it's nice and secure. But then what you want to do is you can either finish this one off now, or you can go and finish off the other one first. Do the same thing with the other wire here. So wherever you would want to finish this off, bring that to that place where you feel it's suitable. So take a bit of time, figure that out, where it's going to sit just nicely, and you're going to be able to secure it to finish it off. And like I said, you can just keep manipulating it a little bit. So once you've got to that place, then you want to do the exact same thing with these 2 wires. Use the weaving wire from that section, go down through the rows, you're up on the other side, weave around, or just catch one of these sections, come back down, and then just weave to fasten this section in place. And then once you've done that, we can then get rid of the excess base wires as well. So I've now gone around all of them and fastened all my sections here, and I've gotten rid of all the weaving wires except for this one. I just want to show you what I do. So all I do is where it's coming out from, after wrapping around the base wires to fasten it a few times, I go right down to where it's coming from, and I cut it off, leaving about 1mm or so of tail, because what I'm going to do is I don't want to just cut it right down, because you're going to probably be able to then have a bit sticking out that you're going to be able to feel, and it's going to dig into your skin, be uncomfortable to wear. So to avoid that, I cut it off so I have about 1mm or so left. Then I take my chain nose pliers, and then you want to squeeze the rest down. So as if it was going another wrap around your base wire. So it actually finishes on the inside, or the underside there. So just grab it with your chain nose and then just roll it inwards there. Because then we get it out of the way from where your fingers are always going to sit in here when you wear the ring. So then that's how I finish off all the weaving wire, and all these are now fastened. You can see the actual ring in the top here is much more secure now. It doesn't move around at all like it did before. So then all there's left to do is then get rid of the actual base wires, so all these groups here. And then all I'm going to do with that is just take one at a time. I'm just going to show you how to do one here. And then right after the last bit of weaving you've done, I want to cut down the base wires, so I have a couple of millimeters left of the actual base wires, where it's just bare base wires. Cut them off, both of them here. Let's do one section at a time. Then I'm going to get my chain nose pliers again. Going to grab right on that end of these 2 base wires. I'm going to bend them downwards, so in towards the bottom part of the rows. So again, the ends aren't sticking out towards the finger, the skin. You're going to grab your end and bend them inwards like this, so that the actual ends go in between kind of the petals, you can say, in the flower, and get nestled in there. And they also just blend in, so you won't be able to see them. If you can see them, you can always readjust a little bit. But then that's how I do that, and I do that all the way around. Just where they're finishing off, make sure you cut them down so you have a couple of millimeters left, bend them inwards, and then just tuck them away like that. And then once you've done that, your ring will be finished, and it's also going to be nice and secure, the top part here. So when you then finished off all your wires there at the back, and make sure you can't feel it anywhere. There's no catching or scratching wire ends that you can feel, so it's going to obviously be nice and comfortable to wear. You want to make sure of that, and also that it's nice and secure. So then your ring will basically be done. You have a nice little rose ring, wire work one, with a little bead in the middle, gives a nice little accent. So this is the one that I did, smaller one. That's the kind of larger one, the larger version. Like I said, you can do however you want to, whatever size you want it to be, if you like the larger one or the smaller one. It's completely up to you, but you can see the different impact they give. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you like the final result here, but otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this wireframe cabochon with a rose on the front of it, so it can look like this. And this is the one I'm going to show you how to make today. So for this one I used a nice and dark gemstone cabochon behind it, so it works perfectly for uniform cabochons colour wise. And then also I've done a different one previously where I use a rose quartz cabochon, so you can see the different looks that you can get just using different materials. And they'll never come out looking exactly the same, which is always nice.